Hi guys, so we going to say Nintendo Switch 2.
The Nintendo Switch has been around a while now, and although it's seen some minor updates, an actual
That one's all let because I don't know. And also guys, it looks like an iPhone X to me.
generational hardware update hasn't happened. It's also not likely to for a while, but Switch is nearly 5 years old, and even though on a recent investor call, Nintendo characterized it as in the middle phase of its life, there's eventually going to be a Switch 2. So what's the wish list? Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on Game Ranks, 10 things we want in the Nintendo Switch 2. Just a quick little note ahead of this. Some of these are gonna be things that they're not gonna do. They'd be fun, or maybe a gimmick that might introduce some new ideas, but some of these are pure fantasy. And you know what? Let's start off number 10 with an example of that. How about flexible OLEDs? Like I said, if we're talking about stuff for the next Switch, let's start off with something totally out there. Flexible screens. Like there's phones with bendable screens that you can buy right now, and that would be some pretty cool technology to possibly incorporate in the next Switch. Basically, what we're imagining is something like the Nintendo DS, where there's one continuous screen, but having a Switch that could fold up could solve a lot of portability issues that the current model suffers from. Like being able to fold up the device would protect the screen from damage and cut its surface area in half. Plus, it would arguably look really cool. There's a little controversy here at the office regarding that. I'm not completely sold on the idea that it would look cool, but this isn't a Falcon video, this is a Game Ranks video. Now the question is, would they ever actually do something like this? I doubt it. Maybe someday, but probably not for the Switch 2, even if it's a ways out, because the cost of production is just
How much?
too high right now, and there's probably other improvements to this technology that will happen over the coming years, and also there's a lot of stuff that consumers would want before a bendable screen. So a foldable OLED's probably not happening, which means a flexible OLED's definitely not happening. But imagine a Switch screen that you could bend like a piece of cardboard. That'd be pretty cool to see. It's a technology where the economics of scale just aren't there yet, but if we're gonna make a list where we're dreaming up ways Nintendo could improve upon the Switch, we might as well dream big. And number 9, keep the Joy-Cons, but make them more ergonomic and durable. We're going to come back down to earth and start talking about some practical things we'd like to see in the Switch 2. The main thing is that we'd like it to stay mostly the same. Keep the screen, keep the dock, the game carts, everything else that makes the Switch a Switch. We'd just like to see a couple of improvements on a few things, and one of the most criticized parts of the Switch are the Joy-Cons. Make no mistake, we really like the Joy-Cons. Having removable controllers attached to the side of the screen is brilliant, and it makes it so you can pretty much play the system any way you want. All that stuff we'd like to stay the same with the next Switch, but what we'd really like is for Nintendo to solve some of the persistent issues that seem to plague these controllers. It's so obvious that it hardly needs to be said, but seriously, with the Switch 2, Nintendo, you gotta fix the Joy-Con drift. It's one of the system's most obvious problems, and something that really feels like it should have been solved already, but it just keeps happening. On top of that, it would be nice if new Joy-Cons had a slightly more ergonomic design. I know that having the controllers slide in flush with the Switch is an important form factor, but maybe with the Switch 2, they could fatten it up a little bit to add some curve to the Joy-Con, just to make it more comfortable to actually hold the thing. Another thing we'd like to see is an honest-to-God D-pad on these things. I know they were designed so each Joy-Con can be used by itself for a lot of different games. That's a neat little feature, but sometimes we're just curious about what the alternative would be. I'm not saying for sure that it would be better, but it would maybe be nice to have the option. Like, you could buy D-pad Joy-Cons or button Joy-Cons. And number 8 is better specs. Now, this is another no-brainer. When the Switch came out, it was already considered underpowered, and now with the next-gen consoles out, it's a system that's starting to show its age. PC gaming, the Xbox Series X, and the PS5 have really spoiled us with 60 frames per second gameplay, so sometimes it's kind of painful to go back to the Switch and play certain games that can barely keep a consistent 30. It's something any Switch user gets used to after a while, and it's less noticeable, at least for us, and especially in handheld mode, it's something to tolerate, but obviously not something we like. For the Switch Switch 2, at bare minimum, we're hoping for a baseline expectation of 60 frames per second for everything, and at least a 1080p resolution dock. But Nintendo also still has that deal with Nvidia going, so we can definitely expect to see improved GPUs and a better CPU along with more RAM. We'd like the OLED screens to stay as well, and if it's not too much to ask, can we keep the price under $500? This being the Nintendo that priced the original Switch at $300 back when it came out in 2017, I don't think it's an unrealistic expectation, but at this point it's also hard to say what anything is going to cost in the next few years. Inflation, chip shortages, etc. So basically everything but better. That's the main thing we want regarding tech on the next Nintendo console. And yeah, it'll definitely be better than what we have now, but considering it's Nintendo, it probably won't be a huge jump in tech. We'd love if it was, but we're not holding our breath. At number 7, an enhanced dock. This is an idea that's floated around for quite a while now. First, it was speculated to be some kind of standalone product Nintendo might put out. Then it was rumored to be part of the Switch Pro that'll probably never materialize, and now we're kind of just hoping to do it for the next Switch. The idea here is that instead of simply being a charging station for the Switch, the dock would provide some kind of additional processing power to the Switch when plugged in. That way, you might be able to utilize DLSS support to upscale to 4K, but only when the Switch is actually in the dock. For the next gen, I doubt Nintendo's going to make handheld mode 4K. I mean, the screen would be too small to justify it anyway. Even if they did bump up the screen size by a few inches, like, it doesn't make sense. For players who would like to experience games in 4K on the Switch, though, this would be a great middle ground solution. It's hard to say how much more expensive something like this would be, but Nintendo could always release a handheld-only Switch 2 like the Switch Lite for people who aren't interested in the higher resolution on the TV anyway. There are third-party docks out there that say they can do something like this, but we'd prefer some kind of official solution. And I think we're being fairly realistic here. We're not even expecting 4K resolutions, just 1080p upscaled to 4K. And to us, that sounds like the sort of thing Nintendo might do. Nintendo always puts consumer friendliness over graphical fidelity, but there's ways they could possibly make the hobbyist and casual Nintendo fans happy. An enhanced dock. At number 6, like a proper online experience would be nice. If there's one feature where Nintendo just lags way behind its competitors, its online experience. Even with them charging a monthly fee to play online, the actual interface, usability, and general experience really isn't that good. For one thing, the actual multiplayer servers can be really hit and miss. I don't know if Nintendo's just cheaping out on them, but there's so many games on the system where lag's a constant issue. It doesn't matter if you're playing wireless or connected by an Ethernet cable through the dock, there's lag, and there's a lot of it. So clearly they need to expand their network infrastructure. On top of that, the whole voice chat system very much needs updating. Having to use a cell phone app instead of just having tools built into the system is so awkward. The reason Nintendo's so guarded about online stuff is probably their kid-friendly image. They make it more difficult for kids to get online as a form of protection, which is a good thing in theory, but putting all these roadblocks in front of grown adults who just want to play a game means there's fewer people actually using your online services. And the eShop needs to be made faster. Easier to use, sure, but like faster. Like, this is more of a dream improvement because it seems like the general online store thing going on with console manufacturers is to make them harder and slower. But still, we'd love a faster, better organized eShop that gives proper exposure to a lot of great but overlooked games that come out every single week. So basically, Nintendo, fix your online. At number 5, internal SSD storage. When the Switch originally came out, it only had 32 gigabytes of standard storage, which was small at the time, but looking back now, it's downright tiny. It accounts for like 1/4 of a Call of Duty game, which is nuts. At least actually changing out the storage was easy, but it's definitely something we'd like to keep. Like, don't turn your next Switch into a cell phone where you can't swap out the internal storage and voiding the warranty. But yeah, like, give us like 126 gigabytes of internal SSD storage. The addition of solid-state drives to next-gen consoles is huge. Loading times are basically non-existent on them, and that is something we would love to see on the Switch, especially given the ability to be so mobile with the Switch. You want to be able to get into a game quickly, not wait for a full minute for the game to load while you're sitting at the dentist or whatever. So an SSD just makes a lot of sense for especially a portable system. They're also only getting cheaper and cheaper to produce as time goes on, so maybe we're being a little conservative conservative with how much storage we actually want, especially
Okay,
if we
guys,
see
just
the
got
Switch
that.
2 display up-res to 4K. I'm not too worried about the display itself, but the dock thing that we talked about, I'd like to see. But we also don't want to see a massive price point, so I don't know. Hopefully this one is a safe bet with the way technology is going, though. At number 4, we'd love to see a better battery. With potentially more demanding hardware, the Switch 2 will probably need a stronger battery, but we'd really like to see one that lasts just a little bit longer. Now, that isn't to say the one that's in there is the worst it could possibly be, but depending on how system taxing a game is, the battery usually lasts between 3 and 5 hours. And now that's talking about the first gen model. A slightly better battery was added later, but we're going to go with that as our baseline. What we'd really like to see is a battery that can make the Switch last like maybe 6 to 7 hours, or at least shoot for that if that's not realistic. It'd be nice if Nintendo included some like battery saving options. There's a few things you can do like disable vibration and lower screen brightness, but some kind of all-encompassing battery saver mode would be really nice to see. For some people, the current battery life of the Switch is more than enough, but for a lot of people who spend time commuting or waiting around at airports, having to rely on a free plug-in or a portable charger all the time can get really old. So anything Nintendo can do to improve the battery for the next Switch, that'd be fantastic.
There's a ton of characters and weapons that you can collect. There's different constellations you
I'm
can get
having
for
a
them.
glitching thing.
And
the
number 3
engine
is backwards compatibility.
impact
When it
this-
comes to games on the
holding
next Switch, this
the
one's going to be
spacebar
huge.
because-
The
Yeah,
Switch wasn't
no,
backwards
no, no,
compatible
no,
with the
no.
Wii U, which is kind of okay because not a lot of people had it. But whatever the Switch 2 is called, it's got to be backwards compatible with the Switch. The install base on the Switch is just massive, so it would make sense for the system to be more iterative, not reinventing the wheel. So just a better Switch that you can still play all of your Switch games on, where the profile actually carries over, your purchases actually carry over, and that every game you already bought for the first Switch works on the new one. That would be fantastic. Yeah, Nintendo has made a mint reselling Wii U games on the Switch, but like I said, the install base on the Wii U was tiny. They sold 13 million Wii U's worldwide. As of December, Switch has sold over 100 million units. It's outsold the original Wii, which was a huge console. And I don't think that's too much to ask, because both the Xbox Series X and PS5 are backwards compatible in a way that's actually pretty good. So it's likely Nintendo will follow suit and make the Switch 2 work with the current Switch. While we're here, another thing we'd love to see would be patches for backward compatible games. Like, it would be great to play Breath of the Wild 60 frames per second without using an emulator. And it's something that other console makers are doing, but it feels less like something Nintendo would do. Yeah, they patch their games, but for the most part, it seems like they usually want to put out a new version that you could buy or just do nothing at all. I may be completely off about this, because maybe in a couple of years, this will be like a consumer expectation that they have to cater to, but it also seems like something they'll be slow to embrace. Even if Nintendo's next system isn't just an updated Switch, even if it's something entirely different, which is unlikely, please keep the backwards compatibility. It's just nice. And number 2 is a more customizable experience. A simple one, but another thing fans complain about with the Switch is the interface. It's really basic. Yeah, that makes it easy to scroll through on handheld mode, but there's a lot of people out there that like a more personalized experience, and we think Nintendo could potentially expand things with the next system. Because at this point, it's pretty clear there won't be a patch coming that adds a real system menu like many people would like what people thought would happen when the Switch first came out. What you see is what you get. We don't expect them to go crazy here, but maybe offering a few different versions of the dashboard would be nice. Like maybe a Wii-style one, or a GameCube one, or SNES Classic-style menu, despite the system not actually having a menu itself. Something like that. Or they could go the full PlayStation route with custom themes and background music. That'd be cool, but perhaps unlikely. For the people out there begging for folders or anything like that, though, that's probably not going to happen. It would be nice if we could organize our game collection a little more than, well, basically not at all. But Nintendo likes to keep things simple, so they tend to avoid putting a lot of options into their menus. It would still be great if they added a few simple ways to customize the screen, even if it's not fancy though. And finally, number 1, something totally out of left field. If there's one thing Nintendo doesn't do, it's rest on its laurels. Like, look at the recent history. From the GameCube to the Wii to the Wii U to the Switch. Like, the Wii U could have been a slightly better Wii, but it wasn't. They added a whole new mechanic that just changed everything up. The Switch was a huge jump for them, and anything but just a standard console release. A lot of people were even suspicious about it, except for me, if you remember. I was one of the people who said it was gonna be big. But, I mean, yeah, in many ways, all of these consoles are just iterations of the last one in one way or another. Probably most obvious between the Wii U and the Switch. But they all added something new and big to the equation instead of just being the same thing but slightly better. That's kind of the big question mark with Switch 2. Will it actually just be the same thing as the Switch with more power, or will Nintendo do something different? For us, and I think probably most people, we'd be happy with more or less the same thing with a new coat of paint and maybe some upgrades in the engine. But I'm not sure if people at Nintendo actually think that's good enough. And in a way, I would like to see Nintendo innovate with something new and unexpected. What they could actually do, though, I have no idea. The Switch itself is basically a near perfect merger of the console and handheld markets, and it feels like they have to keep going with it because there's nothing else that's done it on the level that the Switch has, and I'm not sure I would care if somebody else did do it. The only thing I can think of right now is they could possibly expand their VR ideas that they introduced with the Labo VR kit and incorporate that in the next console, but it could be anything. I just kind of want them to surprise us, you know? Now, to be clear, I don't want them to just reset and start over. I don't want them to go full Wii again and ignore their core audience with some gimmick new thing, but it's always fun to get that sort of Nintendo magic going. Nintendo can be very predictable in some ways, but when it comes to their consoles, they always seem to find some way to do something people don't expect. And it doesn't have to be huge or a total game changer like the Switch was. In fact, in terms of what the Switch is, it is kind of the perfect thing for what it is. But it would also be really cool to see some kind of legitimately surprising thing that adds something positive to the Switch experience. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think.
Okay guys, so thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you have an awesome day and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.